Welcome to the Fail Forward podcast. The purpose of this podcast is change the negative stigma around failure into a positive. Failure is only a negative if we do not learn from it and we give up. Welcome back to the Fail Forward podcast. Today we have got the wonderful Amy Rowlinson, who does the Focus on Why podcast and also is my mentor and trainer in how I came about doing this podcast. And actually, in fact, this podcast wouldn't exist if it wasn't for Amy, because it was a distant idea for me and Amy challenged me on that and said, why not now? So this is why the podcast is here, and it's my absolute pleasure to have Amy on today. So thank you for coming on, Amy.
Thank you for inviting me, Henry. It's really good to be here on the show that we instigated a long time ago now.
Yeah. About a year ago, we were doing the weekly pod sessions and talking it all through. So it's been a great journey, and I really do thank you for your mentoring and your support. So it's been wonderful. So Amy, tell me, how, obviously you now do the Focus on Why podcast, but that didn't all start there. Take me back as far as you need to go to tell me a bit about your journey and how you got into maybe podcasting and business and everything that as far back as you need to go.
Oh my goodness. Okay. So let's get this into some kind of chronological order and also not too long, because we don't want to be here all day. But in terms of where it all started, I think that probably the best place to start is back in 2016. And I had just quit my job on the basis that I realised that where I was not where I wanted to be. My husband was really struggling with his work in terms of his commitment, in terms of his health. So he was working crazy hours, and I was like, this cannot happen. This cannot. It's not sustainable to continue. So I quit my job with the intention of building a property portfolio and focus on that. And I gave myself a 3-year timeline, and I did that. So fast forward 3 years, he stepped back from his work. He's now taking on the responsibilities of working on the property portfolio, and it gave me the free time to spend and do what I wanted to do, which is help people who are in their midlife mostly and guide them through to fulfillment. And that's really a journey that I recognized in myself, that I was very much in autopilot, very much living sort of day by day without really thinking about what the long-term plan was. And so for me, it was that catalyst of understanding who I am and what I can do, and then realizing that I was barely scratching the surface of living a purpose-driven life. And that kind of started it all, because then there was a couple of things that happened. So I got invited to help someone else to run a property network. And then we started doing property training with 3 days, 1 days, and I was doing one-to-one mentoring. But it wasn't really what I loved doing. It was the purpose thing that kept coming through. And so from that perspective, what I then decided, I didn't decide. At the beginning of lockdown, my business partner said to me, let's close this business down. And I was gutted because I'd put a lot of sweat equity into it. And when I really sort of focused on why I was really upset, it was the podcast. I'd started a podcast back in 2019 with Dan. It's called the Property Vault podcast. Absolutely loved this medium, loved connecting with people, loved the work that we were doing. And when he said, let's close the business down, that was what I was going to miss the most. And so I thought, well, I don't need to stop podcasting. I can carry on. And purpose is where I seem to be focusing my attention. I was starting to help people with their own life purpose, having got some clarity around it for myself. And that's when the idea of Focus on Why came to me. And within a month, the show was launched. So that was the end of April 2020. And here we are now, sort of 2.5 years later. And at the time of recording, episode 305. So
wow.
It's been a bit of a journey.
Yeah, definitely. I absolutely love that. And there's so much to untangle in everything you just told me. So, in true Fail Forward and what we're talking about today. So you had a lot of pressure, your husband's working a lot of hours, and just to have the awareness of that, just to go, okay, I need to do something different. And how did that feel leaving your job at that moment? What was that feeling like?
It was really easy. It was a really easy decision. Again, I was upset because I really enjoyed where I was working. But when you put things into perspective, when you understand what's really important, family will always come first for me. And so that decision didn't really feel that hard to make. It was just the start of my next phase in life. And I do call it midlife beginnings. And there have been a lot of midlife beginnings for me. And with that becomes a lot of taking intelligent risks, a lot of reflection, a lot of understanding where my focus should be. So there's lots of different ways of for me understanding what the priority is, what the plan is, and then focusing on that to fulfill it. But it hasn't always been easy, Henry.
No, I can imagine. There are. It's a roller coaster life, isn't it? And it's plenty of ups and downs. But okay, so now moving forward, you're now in this property journey, and you've got your business partner Dan, and then you decide to start the podcast. So tell me, when you decided to start that podcast, how did that feel, and how did that come about?
Yeah, so we were hosting a network, and it was geographically located in Gravesend. So we would have between 50 and 75 people coming every month. So we had a good room full of people, which is great. I know you host network events yourself. And it's a lot of work to get people in the room. And we were providing great content for them. But what we realised is that we could spread more words, more of our knowledge to a larger audience if we used a different medium. So that's where we decided to take to the airwaves instead and take our property knowledge into a larger space. And it just took off. So many people wanted to hear us. They love what they have. And it was downloaded in so many countries. I haven't got the stats right now, but at the time it was around about 90 countries very quickly. What's interesting is we haven't added a single episode since April 2020, and yet it's still in a lot of the charts across the world now. So that content is still being digested, it's still being appreciated, it's still being acted upon. And that's what I love about the podcast, is that it's an asset and it has a longer shelf life than many other sort of social media platforms.
Yeah, absolutely love that. And how many episodes did you get to then?
64.
64. Wow. Okay. So that must have been, so then rolling on, you're sort of getting to the point now where your property portfolio is going good. You're getting the listeners and viewers, and then COVID happens.
Yeah. And so I thought, perfect. Well, I didn't think perfect. I thought, no, that wasn't my initial thought.
I know what you mean.
I thought this is okay. We can take the business online. So it was an opportunity for us to scale in a different way and to flex in a different way. But when Dan sat down with me, he was just saying he wasn't feeling it anymore. He didn't enjoy what he was doing. And there's no point forcing things. That's the one thing that, we can all agree on, is that when things aren't in your flow state, then just don't do it. It's just not worth doing it unless it's something that you really have to do for a particular end result. But this wasn't a have to. This was an option that he had. And so that's where we then parted ways at the beginning of lockdown. And the new podcast was born. And for me, again, out of all of these sort of endings, midlife beginnings, just took me on a completely different journey, and one that I had absolutely no idea was going to take off the way it has.
Love that. And one of my favourite, it's very cliche sayings, is when one door closes, another one opens. And it's so much in life that we go through, and these things are actually really scary, of a business ending or something stopping, or, even when I've had members of staff leave, like really key people, and then actually something really good happens after that. And you're like, oh, okay, so you've had this door closed, and then instantly out of that another one's opened, of you going, right, okay, let's get this new podcast underway. So how did you go about going from idea to actually doing it in a month?
Well, it just happened, Henry. I woke up with the idea on the 1st of April and thought, yeah, that sounds like a plan. And I already had someone booked into the diary for the 3rd of April, and that was Sam Rathling. But she was due to record for the Property Vault podcast. So I'd had to mention to her before we started recording that, Sam, this podcast that you thought you were going to record with me is no longer in existence. I'm now launching a new show. It's got no audience numbers. It's not even live yet. Are you willing to take that leap of faith? And she said 100%. So that was where my first interview happened with her. And after that interview and talking about purpose, I knew that I was onto a good thing, because the conversation just was shaped in such a different way. And we went into so many different sort of avenues. And I knew then that the topic of talking about why we do what we do was going to be a great one. And within a month, I'd recorded over 30 episodes, and I realized, this isn't going to be a weekly show. I'm going to have to release these episodes on a faster pace release for the initial period, at least, because otherwise it's going to be a good year or so before episodes get released out. So many people had time. They had the time to record because they were all at home. So it was definitely a great opportunity, and timing really was in my favour.
Amazing. Absolutely love that. So we've found out how you got to there, but now I'm going to ask you the question: why do you do what you do what you do?
It really comes down to the fact that recognizing that I'd been living on that autopilot, and then shifting the gears to becoming more purposeful and understanding what fulfillment meant, not only for myself, but also for how I could help others to achieve that fulfillment as well. And recognizing that my sort of purpose in itself was to help other people find theirs. It just made sense. It was a case of, right, I understand why I'm on this planet now. I understand what my reason for being is, and how all of the things that I've done in the past have all come together. All these different skills and tools that I have all make sense as a whole. And being a life purpose coach is a joy. It really is. And helping people to mentor them to launch their purpose-driven podcasts is a joy in itself as well.
Absolutely love that. So you're constantly getting in your flow state, and that really works for you.
Yeah, 100%. And flow is really important in terms of just recognizing what is that driver, understanding my values as well and how they fold in. It's all the pieces of jigsaw that I hadn't really put together, and had spent probably the best part of 15 years whilst the children were young trying to work out what it is I can do, because I was a stay-at-home mum for a majority of that time, and I was just thinking, what is it that I could be doing whilst they're at school? What is it I could be putting my hands towards and still be there and present for them when they came home? And if I don't do regret, Henry, but if I'd known about podcasting, if I'd known about life purpose coaching, then I'd be in a different place now. But I don't do regret. I'm where I am right now for all the right reasons.
Exactly that. And I was just about to reframe that, because if you'd have found podcasting in a different time, you wouldn't have been ready to do that, right? I do the same thing. I regret all the time that I didn't fail faster, and I carried on the business when it wasn't working faster, and all these different kind of things. But I wouldn't have gone down that path and learned all the things I'd learned. And I think different things come to different people at different times. So I think it's just, you even said it yourself, you learned a lot over that time that you've now purposed into what you do. So in essence, you've failed forward many, many times. And whilst we're talking about fail forward, what does that mean to you?
Well, for me, it's about reflection, and it's about understanding and really taking the learnings from what happens in life. And I haven't made many huge mistakes or big errors in my life. I would probably say it's just a constant series of small failings. And I'm okay with that. I'm really, really happy with the way that I've taught myself to take those learnings on board. And I see it through a combination of lots of things. It's all about, for me, it's about how I measure success and also how I measure failure. And it is a bit of a gift, really, to be at peace with that, to understand that you can play, you can learn, you can fail, you can grow. And it's trusting yourself that you are heading in the right direction. So for me, it's a combination of many things.
Love that. Absolutely love that. So when you're talking about lots of mini failures, I always talk about that as in I had that my big failure. That is the reason why I'm doing this podcast. And actually, I wasn't aware of all the mini failures, because actually it wasn't one big failure. It wasn't like suddenly just one day I woke up and the business had failed. It was lots of mini failures that compounded, and we all you know the compound effect. So actually you've had the self-awareness over time to realize that and learn all those mini mistakes. So how do you find the self-awareness to already feel that kind of failure and see the success, failure, be able to balance it out and not let it compound into something massive?
I guess it comes down for me, achievement's one of my big values, and I wake up every day and I look to achieve something in that day. It's very heavily linked to my purpose and wanting to live a life of purpose. And being competitive, and not necessarily with other people, albeit that I am as well. I like to win at sport, and I like to win at, if I've got a pub quiz, I have to win that too. But it's a case of play and understanding how learning it comes through that. Learning and growth are again huge parts of what make me Amy. And so when I used to do a lot of rowing when I was younger. And I capsized spectacularly at the national championships when I was 14 actually. And then a year later, I won it. Now, it was understanding that I had to get back in the boat. I had to get back in the boat and I had to row. And I had to really pull together a lot of different feelings and different understandings to know that that was just one small blip in a much longer scope. And it's about taking those, as I said earlier, about taking intelligent risks, because if you don't take the risks, you're not going to improve, you're not going to learn, you're not going to grow. And so for me, I'm constantly taking intelligent risks and being willing to try things that are new always, because if you don't do that, then you're not going to grow. You're not going to, if you're not willing to experiment, then you're not willing to experience failure. And I don't know if you've ever heard of Tony Bazan.
No, I haven't actually.
Oh, that's cool. Because I love it when people haven't heard of him, because I get to share something that's pretty awesome. So Tony Bazan was someone who invented a system called TEFCAS. And TEFCAS is about a success mechanism, but it's learning through trial. It's learning through failure. And his TEFCAS system, the T stands for trial. So you try something. And then the E, the next part is event. So there's always an event. And the F is the feedback that you get from that. And then it goes into checking. The C is checking. The brain's checking what that input is and seeing whether it's sort of going to give you the information that you need. And the A is about adjusting. So adjusting to that information and where you compare your performance to the goal and you make the adjustments that you need to go forward. And then the next bit is about that realignment into the success piece. So it's about learning from failure, and it's a perfect system for me, because it's all about the effort that you take on board. No matter what you're doing, your brain is trying to succeed, so you're training your brain to acknowledge failure by seeing it and reframing it into a learning piece, and that for me is a brilliant model to go with.
Yeah, absolutely love that. It's just I love the how you've positioned that, or how that, what's his name again, sorry?
Tony Bazan.
Tony Bazan. So I'm going to look that up after this for sure. Yeah. And to have the acronym with it to remember, because you're right, and he's right. You're constantly it's about failing, working it out, getting the mindset right, work out what's gone right and wrong, go again. And to not give up and just see that. And when you were 14 years old and you fell out of that rowing boat, how did that feel?
Really cold.
Yeah.
I was in Strathclyde, and I tightened up my laces really tight, and I was in a single scull. It was super choppy water, and I just remember going under and just thinking, I can't get myself out this boat, and really struggling because I double knotted myself just to make sure that I'd really, really got that as a resistance. And I got out the boat. I was rescued. I was brought to the shore. And I was just so embarrassed. I was so embarrassed, and all my family were there, other friends there supporting me. And I just remember looking out and just seeing the rest of the competitors and just thinking, that it really, really upset me. So it drove me forward to, okay, this is a blip. It is a learning. Certainly don't tie up your shoelaces that hard. But also check your boat, making sure that you've got it set up for the weather conditions. I'd been used to rowing on, pretty much mill pond water. This was a very different new learning for me. And so, I could take that learning into so many different areas of my life. And I have done, that it was a big piece for me in my formative years. And so when I went the following year, it was a national schools race first, and I caught a couple of crabs right at the beginning of the race, nervous. I was in a double scull with another girl, and that lost us the race. And so a few weeks later, when it was the national championships, we were in a different boat. We were in a coxless pair. So I've moved different boats in these different circumstances. And it was just the two of us in that coxless pair. We were 15 in the J16 category, but we were both so focused because of the errors that we'd made, or I'd made previously. And it was not letting her down that was in my mind. It was a focus on what I needed to do. And being in that boat with someone else and making sure that you are rowing together as one is a tough ask. And then you've got the pressure of the competition around you. You've got the pressure of it being in front of all those people who'd seen me the previous year. Not that anyone would have remembered that I'd capsized, but I did. And I didn't want that to happen. So it was a very different image that I had in my mind to get over that finishing line in a different way. And
then you went and won it.
Yeah. And it was a long time ago now. It's a long time, 32 years or so now. And it was 1990. And but it stays with me. Those moments stay with me a lot.
And so what do you think it is? Why were you so driven to win? What is it in Amy that wants to win so much all the time?
There's a natural high, the natural high that you get. I'm sure there's a dopamine rush, and I get that through sport. I definitely get that through either watching or participating in sport. And also the team element of being part of a group of people, part of not just me alone. So there's that collaboration element to it. And so connectedness, I think it's part of that. And that's why, for me, achievement and connectedness are so important in my work, and why I involve so many people in my work, because I recognise that it's not just about me. It's about other people, and that by the shared wins that we have, and they can be small ones, Henry, they don't have to be big wins at all. They can be small celebrations that I'm always looking to achieve and celebrate and recognise along the way. So again, it comes down to reflection again, and knowing, having that very clear understanding of what success means, what failure means, and how I measure both of them as an individual. Because I think we all have different measurements, but if you don't know what you're measuring, you don't know when you're succeeding, and you don't know when you're failing.
Absolutely love that. I love that. And I get exactly what you mean when other people's wins, because like yourself, I mentor tree surgeons now and do a tree surgery mastermind. And there's nothing more, I actually think I buzz more from other people's wins than my own. And when I get a message say, Henry, I've just done this, or we do one of our planning sessions, they're like, I've smashed all my goals and more. And I'm just like, there's a great sense of satisfaction, isn't there, when you're helping other people?
100%. Yeah. And so it's understanding and recognizing, and I've got 2 grown-up kids, they're in their late teens now, and helping them through understanding as well how they measure their success and their failure, and how it is a gift to learn. It's something that J.K. Rowling said when she spoke in her commencement speech back in 2008. She spoke of the benefits of failure and how it had really sort of been an importance for her in her life. And it's such a powerful speech, understanding that when you strip away what she said, the inessential, and stop trying to measure yourself against other people, but to understand what's important for you. And I think that's where it comes down to understanding and trusting yourself, and being very self-aware of what it means to you. So it totally goes down to sort of flow, habits, all of the above, all of the different elements.
Absolutely love that. I absolutely love that. And Stephen Bartlett recently posted something on his LinkedIn about the only person that you should be comparing yourself is the person of yesterday, of you. And I think we're very much stuck in this culture now of social media, and everyone's living their best life on social media, and everyone's comparing and going, oh, but they're doing this and they're doing that. And we should all just be comparing ourselves of our past selves and being in competition with ourselves rather than comparing against everyone. albeit that does help push you on, but also I think it has some negative feelings. So you're just talking about your children. How do you get those messages across to your children about failing forward, about that when things don't go quite so right, that, you know, it's part of learning?
It comes down to growth mindset. We've always supported, my husband and I have always supported the children in their efforts. So not always focused on the results at all. It's about the effort that they put in, and knowing and supporting them in what they've put in. And they know themselves, if they've not achieved what they wanted to achieve, they know it's as a result of not putting in the effort towards it. And so that for me is a mindset thing. It's something that I've endorsed, and we've always sort of encouraged from when they were young. There's Carol Dweck's mindset book is a great place to start.
I'm reading it right now, and and I've been doing the same now. I'm like, I was with my son at football yesterday. I'm like, Ned, 10 out of 10 for effort, like effort. Like as soon as you were talking, that book was just going through my head, and it's a great book, isn't it?
It is. It's so true, because we're as a society, we're conditioned to believe that success is what we're striving for, and yet actually it's a case of we've all got these different measures, and as you were just saying, you can't just look at what other people are doing and then feel yourself as a failure. If you look at where your starting point is and what you're wanting to achieve, and again each day measuring it so that you know that you're heading towards it, that's what's important.
Yeah, absolutely love that, because I kind of still do that now. Even the business is reborn 3 years on, and I'm looking at like other people similar age to me, and it's difficult. But I think I was very fixed mindset 5 years ago. I was fixed mindset, and now learning growth mindset. It's kind of the thing that you wish they'd teach more in school, right?
Yeah, it's about trying new things. It's about going out of your comfort zone, knowing that you are preparing yourself to fail, but it's okay. You know, you're preparing yourself to fail and know that there's going to be a learning in there. It goes back to the TEFCAS system, and you're just reprogramming yourself. But it's a case of, it's been said so many times. You know, you've got Nelson Mandela, who said it's all about, getting back up again if you get knocked down. It's about Henry Ford saying that failure is only the opportunity to begin again more intelligently. It's all of that. It's about pursuit of success, but knowing that failure is a necessary part of that, and that it's not to be knocked back by fear. And so many people sort of stop because they're afraid of failing. Whereas what I'm looking at is I'm not necessarily afraid of failing. That's not what's stopping me. For me, it's always a case of, well, this is exciting. This is an adventure. This is a journey, and I'm willing to take it. And I have done since, falling out a boat. That definitely was a catalyst of like, well, what's the worst that's going to happen? Well, I could have drowned, but I wouldn't be here having this chat now.
Absolutely love that. I was going to come back to that actually moment. So you believe that moment is the catalyst, and you've now used that, and that's helped shape your adult life.
I guess it was definitely a pivotal moment for me. And there have been other moments. I used to coach rowers as well, and I used to coach visually impaired rowers who were the same age as me at the time. So I was about 16, and I was taking them out on the river. And that's a responsibility, taking out other people on a boat. One thing, but visually impaired, not that we're going to capsize. We're in a big clunky boat. It's going to be okay. But it was a case of really relaying that information to people, to helping them understand what it was they were doing and getting them to row in sync. Now that's a challenge, but it wasn't scary for me. I was like, I can do this. This is going to be a great success.
Could you imagine if you'd have given up after you capsized, what your life would have been? Where do you think you'd be? Do you think you'd be a bit more fixed mindset?
I think maybe. It's hard to do the what if on that one. There's been lots of sliding doors moments for me in life, and I think the important thing for me is to make a choice, make a decision at any one of those sliding door moments, and not regretting what the alternative would have been. I am someone who strives for consistency, but also in the same frame, if something's not working, I don't consistently continue it for the sake of it. It's like, actually, Amy, it's not working anymore. You can stop that. So it comes right back down to reflection. And I think that I am a great reflector, and it's something I do on the podcast. why I'm so curious. It's why I have this show called Focus on Why, because I'm curious to hear other people's journeys. And then I get those moments where I consciously have reflections with actions episodes after every 5 interviews. And it's not just listening and publishing them and putting them out there. It's like, okay, so what is it that I've learned from these episodes? What is it that I could do? What is it I could change? Have things not been going so great in my own world or business, life, whatever? How could I then apply some of these learnings into what I'm doing?
Absolutely love that. Absolutely love that. So you're constantly developing and learning as you go, completely reflecting. So do you listen to your own podcast?
Yeah, absolutely. So I listened back to every single episode, firstly, just to check if it needs editing in any way, if it needs the audio needs cleaning up. But for me, again, I'm writing notes, and I'm writing notes about what is of relevance for me to sort of pull on, which threads I want to share in a later episode. But also, it gives me an insight into the work I'm doing. It's reflecting on how I could improve, how I can be a better interviewer, how I could be a better podcaster and improve the listening performance for others. It's a constant learning and growing.
Learning forward, failing forward. I mean,
all of the above.
All of the above. Yeah, I listen back, and I listen back when I'm driving, and people say, you listen to your own podcast? And I'm like, yeah, it's difficult at first because you've got to hear your own voice and be happy with that. But also, you know, it's the constant developing and learning and keeping moving forward. So tell me about the training you do. So how did that come about? So you've got this Focus on Why podcast, and then you decide to start training people. So how did that come about?
It's exactly the same as what happened with me in other areas, for example, in property. You do something, you do it well, people come to you and say, how did you do that? And then as a result, I ended up mentoring people. So that happened in property. It also happened in the podcasting. I had people coming up to me and saying, I love the show. I'd love to get a show off the ground. Can you help me? So it was led by other people. It wasn't something that I consciously said, right, I'm now going to be a podcast mentor and strategist. No, it was a case of other people recognized that I had a skill set that they could ask and me questions, and I could help them. And that was it. And yeah, the business arose from there.
And how long have you been doing that for?
Podcast mentoring, probably since the beginning of late 2020.
Amazing. Because the reason why I ask is because the training that I received was amazing. Like literally, the what came with it, the sessions that we had together, but then all the check sheets and everything like that. I mean, it was amazing value, amazing training, the systems. I still go back and look at it now, to have all those check sheets. So how did it evolve from that? Were you always that organised from day one, or is that just have you failed forward?
Okay, so I'm well known for being an organised person and having systems, but I'm a creator, so I like to know how to create something and what the process is behind that as well. So I'm a bit of a both kind of details person, but also a big sky thinker as well, which is a little bit unusual to have the combination of both. So what I was doing is, as I was working and doing things, I was like, well, I can set this out so that I know that if, for example, I need someone to edit it, then they know exactly what it is that I want editing. And I was like, okay, well, other people need this for when we're doing training. So I started to put together all of the checklists. And as I was going through my first cohort of a group program, which was different to just working one-to-one, I was recording videos as and when I had each of those cohorts. So it just all started to come together as a whole piece. So yeah, it just really worked. So thank you. I'm glad that you had found the benefit in all.
Yeah, it was brilliant. Honestly, to set up, I mean, I wouldn't have this show and be as organised as I am, and I'm still learning. And not as you got an email about 5 minutes before this. I'm still learning and getting there. But the structure and the foundations that I got to build from that course to be able to start and just go for it, and also get into top 3 on the first day in the business and entrepreneur. You know, I wouldn't have done that without you. If I'd have done that on my own, I would have never have that screenshot where I was in the same area as Stephen Bartlett and Gary Vee and all those other people. So yeah, the training was amazing. So If people would want to work with you on that, if anyone's listening and thinking, I really want to start a podcast and I want to work with Amy, how do they get hold of you, Amy?
Well, probably the best place is to go to amyrowlinson.com and you'll be able to reach out to me, or just use my email, amy@amyrowlinson.com. I'm on the social media platforms, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. You'll find me.
Brilliant. And I'll put that in the show notes. So, and also with your coaching you do, tell me a bit about that. And do you have a specific ideal clients that you work with, or is it for, how does your coaching work?
Oh, I love my coaching. Honestly, it is just magical to work with people who are looking for that clarity. They feel that they're at a crossroads in life, or that one of my clients described it as feeling as though he was in a washing machine, which I just love it. Just there's a constant cycle of just autopilot going round and round and not actually knowing where he's meant to be going in life. So I help people to guide them towards creating incredible midlife beginnings, and it tends to be people who are in their midlife who have realized, so that in their sort of early 40s through to late 50s, that kind of demographic. But I've also worked with younger people. I've worked with a couple of teenagers recently, who late 19-year-old late 19, early 20s, and also some slightly older clients as well. But it's to really understand what it is that you're on this planet for. And there's a culmination of different elements that I piece together with them so that they can really see where their skills and strengths lie, where their talents are, what their gifts are, and just understand more about themselves. And when they do that, they then focus on what they want to do on the piece that's bigger than them. And that's where the fulfillment piece comes in. Because when you understand what your purpose is, what your life's work is, and where that can be sort of deployed in terms of what you're going to be doing to help others. And that's what it comes down to ultimately, is your service to others.
Absolutely love that. So you take people from a journey from where they are, where they're might be a bit confused about where they're going in life. They're not sure maybe that they're quite happy, and then you help them find that purpose and make that decision to leap towards it.
Yeah, avoiding midlife crises and create midlife beginnings instead, and stop people from just filling in the moments and create moments that are fulfilling. So absolutely love that. You touched on it earlier a bit about, and it sounds like you've done this quite well, is going at a point of going, actually, I'm going to stop doing that and I'm going to start doing this, and I'm going to stop doing that. And I think quite often we are, as human beings, we get comfortable, we get in our comfort zone, and then we tend to just carry on doing something, even though it's not making us happy, or if this is what we think we should be doing. So you help people make those decisions and sometimes stop, because, as you say, sometimes that's the most difficult thing to say. No, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to do this. So is that something you work with people to do? Yeah, 100%. It's about, I call it sort of like the legacy learnings. What is it that you want to leave as a legacy, and choose to live that legacy right now. So it's a case of, what do you want to be known for, and then do that now.
Absolutely love that. So if any of my audience now listening to this going, I just don't think I'm right where I am in my life, what one bit of advice would you give them? I know that's a difficult question, but
so that they don't think they're right,
they might. Right now, if someone's listening to this and they're getting to that point, they're in a job or running a business, and it's just they're not in flow state, and they're just thinking, I know there's something more in life that I could give to this life, or a different trajectory I should be on.
It's likely the main cause for that initial conflict comes down to values, where your values are in conflict. So you are likely to be living against them instead of living aligned with them. And it doesn't mean that you have to completely shift your job, your whole, like it might be, but it doesn't have to be that. It's about finding where in your work you are going to be more aligned with your values. But firstly, you have to know what those are.
Yeah. And looking for those, like, for example, I'm currently reading, as well as Caroline Dweck's book, but I'm only about 10% in because it's more like a workbook, but Dr. John DeMartini's Values Factor. Have you read that?
Fabulous book.
Yeah, I have to keep picking it up and put it back down because it keeps asking me lots of questions and then I've got to write everything down. But would you advise, working on some sort of book like that, working through your values is...
100%, because when you align your values with your work, you become valued for your work. And the DeMartini is brilliant. I love his work. Really, a really big fan. And The Values Factor is a great book.
Yeah, absolutely love that. So if people again want to work with you, that's the same place as the podcast. We'll put all those links within the bio and description for this.
100%. Yeah. So the easiest way is just reach out to me via amyrowlinson.com.
Amazing. Love that. So we're sort of coming towards the end, but we've talked a lot about failure. What does failure really mean to you, if you could sum it up?
I love failure. I think failure is probably the best thing we can embrace in life, because if we look to embrace it, it means that we've tried. It means that we've pushed ourselves out of our comfort zone. It means that we have really stretched ourselves. But it comes right back to, what do we then do next? It's about reflecting, learning, and then taking action. So for me, look towards failure. Don't look away from it. Look towards it, embrace it, and take it on, because for me, the next step is always going to be a success.
Absolutely love that. Don't fear failure, fail forward, right?
100%.
Awesome. Do you know what? It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on today, Amy. It's been amazing for you to train me and get me to where I am, and then now to have you on the show and share your wonderful wisdom on purpose, why, and failure. It's been a fantastic interview. So thank you for coming along.
Thanks, Henry.